know what some of them are.
I had a beaver come in. I had a nice orchard going. I had some peach trees.
Okay, we are live.
Yeah, I had peaches.
Good morning, everybody, again. Here we go. We're going to continue our discussion. And the next item is going to be the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. And we have a couple of folks with us this morning from, okay, who we got? All right, good morning. How you doing?
Good morning.
Okay, what do we got with Lamoille Valley Trail? Where's that?
So for the record, I'm Dan Delavriere, Rail and Aviation Bureau Director. In our bureau, we have rail trails as one of our new programs. We've brought all the rail trails that we own sort of back into the bureau. So we're managing all the trails. So we have a consistent kind of look, feel, customer experience across the state. So we hired Jackie Casino. She's going to be our rail trail. She is our rail trail program manager to do all this. We started with the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, and we did a sort of management plan, and we're going to use that as our sort of consistent model to use. So Jackie's got a presentation. She's going to run you through sort of the overall state, have a little bit of focus on the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail here, but try to give you guys a feel of kind of where this program's headed, because it's new. It's new.
You saw my bill. I got a bill to put the rail trail back to the Amtrak. To make sure it's,
Yeah, all four.
okay.
Yeah.
Put that all right from the center. Just a joke, folks out there.
Right.
I don't want to get a lot of phone calls, all right?
I think it would take more than an entire transportation budget to even.
Well, we've been, certainly this committee, we're very proud of that trail. It does a lot of good along the whole section. What's 100 miles or?
So there's not, Lamoille Valley's around 96 miles.
Wow.
We've got about 150 miles total statewide.
Wow.
Missisquoi Valley is about 26 miles.
Everyone speaks highly about it. My daughter will go over there and do it on a walk. But it's just a beautiful trail. I guess it's you go from area to area. It's
Yeah,
Go from St. John's Spring to Swan.
you can. Yeah. It's 96 miles. So I mean, it's long. It's
all the bridges completed on it, or
There's a couple left we're doing. We're getting close.
Okay.
But
It
yes,
was just one.
I think there's two, but there's one that's
it was
basically
initially it was a
done.
big bridge. I recall that we had to.
That was over the Lamoille and Cambridge. That was a big bridge.
Yeah, that was a
there.
big.
That was
it
a
was
couple-
almost a drawbridge.
A couple years
Yeah,
ago.
that was a couple of years ago. Yeah, that was, and that bridge, the pier had basically failed, and we had to.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
we had to do that one fairly quickly because we were out of time. The pier that was in the river had been, washed out. So.
We need to use a special bridge for Barry for one of the bridges on the rail trail. We have one? Yeah.
Yeah, we have a substitute bridge in Grand Isle that we use for the drawbridge. You can borrow that one.
Yeah, I can have that one too. Okay. All right.
Yeah, all right. All
I'm
right.
gonna- I'm going to step aside and I'm going to put Jackie up, and she's going to run you through a presentation.
Good morning, Jackie. Good morning. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what your role is.
Well, let's pull this presentation up.
How close to your house is it? Does it go
Now,
close to your-
question in terms of presenting in Zoom.
For me to get, I go down to the.
I have-
See if I can help.
Share.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Question. Perfect.
On the Peach Road is where that comes from.
Okay.
That must circle around it quite a bit.
It goes up by Marty's and then it circles around
Is it close to Marty's?
Yeah,
and.
comes right out there.
Oh, wow, that's good stuff.
No, it's a great spot.
Yeah.
Great spot for everybody, and it just works. It's a good, it's a good part of the road for it to be there.
Not only that, frankly, he has a public bathroom
Yeah.
and he
boy,
has
that-
porta potties
wow.
when the store is
That's
closed. So,
important.
so he's sort of like a rest stop.
You got a charge station, charging station there.
That's important.
And a
Yeah, well,
fairly large parking lot, which
He
with
does.
the, all this,
Okay.
trailers for snow machines, I guess.
Good, Jackie, all set.
All right, thank you. Well, for the record, I'm Jackie Casino. I'm the VTrans Rail Trails Program Manager. I've been with the agency for about 10 years. And as Dan mentioned, we're here today to give you a snapshot of what the program is as it is new. to highlight what's happening on the LVRT and some of our other trails,
So you've been there for 10 years, but in this role,
just since last spring.
that's what the position was.
Correct. That's correct. And then to answer any questions you or anyone else might have.
Yep.
So a bit about the Rail Trails program, which is new to the agency. In fact, we are the only DOT, AOT in the nation to house a Rail Trails program. I like to joke and say we're an army of 1.5, but that's untrue because we are supported from staff across the agency, our sister agencies, regional planning commissions, trail champions, and communities along all of our trails. We're working with these trails, many champions and partners as we develop this program. As Dan mentioned, we officially took responsibility for the LVRT and the Delaware and Hudson Rail Trail this past summer over on July 1st. And what that means is we're responsible for local and regional communication and coordination, maintenance, marketing, and general trail oversight and operations. And as we mentioned, it's not just the LVRT. We have 4 state-owned rail trails. There's the BB Spur and Newport and Derby, Delaware and Hudson in the northwestern part of the state, or excuse me, southwestern part of the state, and then the Siskoy Valley Rail Trail in the northwestern part of the state, and the LVRT in the northern part of the state. So all combined, that gives us a little under 150 rail banked trails.
Where's the
And-
BB? Where's the BB? I've heard of that many times.
It's in Newport City, goes right up to
You
the
have the
Canadian
map?
border.
Oh,
I don't have a map of that trail, but it is in Newport and Derby, right along Wheaton from ADOT. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
so it goes to
You
Canadian border.
should.
Excuse me?
It goes to Canadian border.
You go stop at
Yes.
the Canadian border.
You go across into the border.
You can't. No, it stops right there, yeah.
You can, you'll just be.
Yeah, you'll have company.
Okay, no, so they didn't continue the trail.
No,
No, no.
no.
Okay. I heard about it, kind of didn't know where it was.
Beautiful.
As we get the
trail.
Canadians to allow us to go to Montreal on the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, okay, all right.
The Amtrak's coming to Newport.
So that's a wooded area, I suspect.
Yeah, it goes, yeah, it
Is
goes.
there a path around the lake that connects to BB? Is that farm?
There are other side trails
Yeah.
that connect to the BB.
Where you guys had, before I was there, when you guys put on the Scotts Cove Farm, you guys had put the funding
Right.
into the, that bridge and all that stuff. So it's kind of, you can get to that. There's a
Does
trail.
it connect to the BB?
It does. Yep, it does.
And the BB, like a number of our trails, are a really great example of partnerships that we have with nonprofits or towns to use these trails as an anchor. They're spur trails. I think everybody knows these are 4-season trails. So we're really fortunate that in the winter, they're either maintained by VAST for grooming, or in the case of the BB Spur, there's a local ski club that maintains it. There's diverse user types from equestrians, snow machines, cyclists.
Who maintains the Lamoille Valley in the winter? The snow machine?
During the winter, it's VAST.
Wow, they do all the whole mileage?
They do, so all the local clubs.
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
big commitment.
It's a huge partnership. We're
And
really lucky to
mushers,
have
don't
them.
forget the mushers.
And then there's the mushers. So
The mushers.
annually, I think it's important to highlight,
Dog sled.
we just had the LVRT sled dog race this weekend. It's the longest race for mushers in the state of Vermont. And with climate change and all of that, a number of folks from out of state come because they can't have those type of races as frequently anymore in Massachusetts and Connecticut. So it's a huge draw. So there were 35 teams that competed this past weekend. It's a very big deal. So we're really proud of it. I think it's important to know, although I'm sure everybody at the table knows, this is an ADA accessible trail. All of our trails are. It has a 10-foot wide crushed compact stone surface and at least 2-foot shoulders on either side.
Wow.
So it really
14
is.
foot wide.
Mhm.
Wow.
And it really is a trail for everyone. And that's what we, really sell it as. You don't have to have fancy equipment to come out. You can literally come out your front door and start walking on it. So it's all 4 of our trails are pretty special like that. General program overview. This slide really demonstrates the diversity of the physical assets we have along just one of our trails. So the image you see here is just for the LVRT, right? 93 miles of trails, 6 fishery accesses, 29 historic sites, 26 trailheads. Some are informal, some are formal. And the reason, I put this image on here is it really demonstrates the diversity of these trails. And therefore, as we develop this program, we're very aware that the program has to be diverse and nimble as well in order to support the communities that these trails go through. And in order for the program to be successful and sustainable long term.
Wow,
I didn't realize you had 5 tunnels on that trail.
wow, 34
Yeah.
cattle paths.
Yeah.
The one thing that is still a challenge, and that was the trailheads and the parking.
Yes, and we'll get into that. That's a huge focus for us in the next 3 to 5 years.
It's gotta be, because if you own a business and the big parking lot, you can't have all your parking
Right.
capacity taken up by
Right.
people that
People
would be
that are gone all
parking
day.
there all day.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so the parking by some of the railroad stations are very limited.
Does that happen to Marty's?
Oh, it does, it
Has
does.
to.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the program really is looking at partnering with communities and other trail champions to connect these towns with funding opportunities or technical assistance for projects that are on or related to the trails. We're establishing best management practices for maintenance and operations, and really, working smarter and not harder, and developing a structure to really focus the multitude of volunteer efforts we have along all of
Harder
these
and
trails.
smarter.
Exactly right. But we have, that's something that, we really worked with VAST on as for the LVRT in terms of transferring of the management. A huge volunteer network, and so how do we, use those resources and those energies and direct them in a way that's appropriate for something that's now managed by AOT.
Has that transition, of course it's new, but that transition between VAST and you, and it's gone well, it's
It has.
no sore people as far as, because they feel like a partner as much as what they were before.
I think so. I can't speak for VAST, but we do. I have a Ken Brown on speed dial. We chat almost every week. And then
I'm on the snowmobile council,
Yes.
That's right, we appointed her again.
and I have served, and I go to the meetings routinely. And actually what happened was the trail was much greater than VAST could support.
right.
And it became really a source of concern, because the VAST members in the southern part of the state are like saying, VAST doesn't exist to simply support the LVRT.
Right.
And it was taking so much of the administrative time and the money, and then they got tied up with the Act 250. And it just really, the demand on the VAST organization was much greater than they could support. And so I think it was with some relief that recognizing that it took AOT resources, and with the engineering required to complete it in a faster way, was way more than a volunteer and membership organization could support. So I think, in fact, not to have provided this response and the AOT involvement, it was not something that I think VAST could support and sustain over the long haul. And a statewide organization wasn't particularly interested in saying our only focus or priorities got to be this trail. So
They have to keep it plowed in the winter too, I mean.
they have groomers.
I'm a groomer, but I'm saying, that's a long distance.
So where VAST was doing regular maintenance on the trail before, and what is their role now? Are they a stakeholder, a leaseholder, or?
Yes, so they have a operating agreement from November to April. So they are responsible for general maintenance and grooming during that time period. So, and then, in addition to working with VAST central office, we do work with the local clubs, both on the LVRT and then other trails like the DNH trail, where there are some VAST clubs that groom segments of that trail as well.
So we give some finances for this, to do this.
Finances for grooming the trail.
Yeah.
That is through VAST.
But they do get money through the state, through the registration. So,
Oh, okay, okay,
so,
because I mean, that's pretty expensive,
yeah.
when you.
And then so there's money to fund equipment, and they submit requests, and
Okay,
they try to manage it the best they can to
yeah,
support.
because you can't do 93 miles in one day.
Well, and then the other, the clubs do it, so
Yeah.
there are multiple clubs that do certain segments. And the other is law enforcement. That's the other big thing on the trails. For speed, obviously.
Yeah, so the speed limit on that trail for snowmobiles is 35 miles an hour. So, and it is, we do have state police, we have sheriffs, we have different game
Well,
wardens.
there is.
Yeah.
Well, we put some funding to that last year, didn't we, to help with that?
Yeah, and there's funding for that.
Do they have snowmobiles?
Yes, they have snowmobiles.
We're doing an electric snowmobile yet.
They got them.
Yeah, they're coming.
Is yours electric V?
Yeah, no,
It's about
that's,
like this.
that's those basically the snow maintenance, basically if there's a tree that falls down in the winter, they'll cut it. But, once the snow is gone, V-Trans through Jackie's program, we're gonna do all the other maintenance. If there's a surface problem, a bridge problem,
A washout.
a washout, a culvert, anything like that, that'll be through AOT. So that's what Jackie.
And all this stuff is the same for the other trails.
No, well, except for the
Well, it will
BB.
be. See, okay, so this LVRT management plan that Jackie's gonna run through is sort of that's our model, and we're gonna use that for all our trails. So
Except there's no motorized on the BB spur, right? It's
you
all,
can snowmobile.
okay, you on that one?
Yes, yeah, all
But a local ski club is that's the exception in terms of a local ski club grooms that one trail.
Yeah.
But Bass does, the local clubs do groom the MVRT, LVRT segments of
Takes
the
a lot of
DNH.
coordination to keep everybody happy. Well,
It is, yeah.
Okay, go right ahead.
So just really quickly, I know Dan already spoke to this in terms of where I live in the AOT network. We are within Rail and Aviation. It's a separate program. Again, I'm very fortunate to be able to have a hybrid position where I'm in the field half the time, meeting with communities, and then behind the desk half the time. There's more work than one person can do, and I'm very fortunate to share a field technician with property management, and then we hope to be able to expand that into 2 limited service positions later this summer, because there are 150 miles of trail and we just really need more eyes on the trail is what we're coming to find out. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, the plethora of communities, trail champions, volunteers that are involved and engaged in all 4 of these trails, there's a lot of energy there. And so really, thinking about, well, what would work best for these groups to channel their energy in a structured way. So something that the Missisquoi Valley Rail Trail has had since the late 90s is a rail trail council. So we're doing that for all 4 of our rail trails. So right now the Missisquoi has a rail trail council, and the LVRT, because it is so large, we're breaking it up into 3 different regions, but that will also have a rail trail council. And that's the opportunity for municipalities to have a representative, to have a seat at the table for organizations like VAST, the regional economic development corporations, the regional planning commissions, other special interest groups, whether it's local motion or equestrians, to really have a conduit of information from us to them and vice versa. It also really pools resources. So for example, if East Hardwick, Walden are interested in applying for a grant for, a trail side kiosk, a trail side amenities build out, and it just economically doesn't make sense to go for federal funds, they can apply as a consortium, and this is a method to do that. These councils, we're really fortunate to have a partnership with the RPCs. They'll serve, their staff will serve in an administrative role in order to help organize these meetings and keep things moving forward. So it seems to have been a good fit for the MVRT since the 90s. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, so that's our plan statewide for all 4 of our rail trails. Really quickly, Dan touched on this concept of a management plan. We recently completed the first one for one of our trails. This is an example of goals and objectives that were developed for the LVRT management plan that was completed in the late fall. We will have one for all 4 of our rail trails.
That's the result of Amy Bell's.
It is, correct. And really the whole point of these plans is really to have a forum to be able to engage the public and stakeholders in a robust planning process, so that we're able to identify a cohesive vision for each of our trails, to detail management and maintenance strategies to support asset management and consistency corridor wide. We want people to know whether they're getting on Swanton or St. Johnsbury, that they're on the LVRT, whether they're getting on in Castleton or Rupert, that they're on the DNH trail, and that those are state-owned assets. And also these plans give us the opportunity to identify strategies to spur or complement economic development efforts and community development efforts to improve the user experience and to provide connections to existing or planned facilities along all of our trails. So again, we'll be starting on the next management plan, the MVRT, late in 2023. The LVRT plan is available on our website. Switching gears a little bit.
Next question.
Sure.
Is there a code of conduct as far as who's got the right of way
Yes.
on the trail?
There is. And so in general, with the exceptions of snow machines, you can sort of think of it, how I explain it to folks, because it can be somewhat confusing, is if it's easy for you to hop off, the easier it is for the user to hop off, you need to yield to someone else. So skiers, flat tire bikers need to yield to snow machines because it's obviously harder for them to pull off, right? So we do have trail etiquette signs, is what we call them, on the trail now. And then in the spring, we'll be updating our signage package because there's new segments of the trail that have come on, and we'll add new ones to that. In addition, we all know that we can put a lot of signs out there. Not everybody reads them. And so we
Well,
are.
they read them and don't,
They choose not to follow them. A few bad eggs can spoil things for a lot of people. So I have a lot of direct communication and outreach with the towns if there's any issues coming up in terms of ATV use on the trail, or people feel like a snow machine is speeding through their downtown. So we have a lot of those one-on-one conversations.
Is that the
And-
trail right there?
This is the trail. Yes, yeah.
Nice wooded area.
And so we are also putting some time and effort into public service announcements. So videos, both for winter users and for summer, fall users, that are going to demonstrate who yields to whom. And so those will be available through a variety of media outlets. Just this Thursday, we're going to film the first one. So again, like, just trying to have as many touch points as possible with folks, knowing that, again, not everybody's going to follow the directions, but there are signs, and we'll have media outreach and engagement as well around
what's
this.
really amazing is, well, I walked part of the way from Channel Drive at the end,
Yes.
up toward Harrington Hill and Malden. And you look and the old stone walls, and you think about, I mean, there was a great deal more open land and settlement 100 years ago. Of course, Vermont was pretty much deforested because of the sheep industry, but you look and you realize they're old cellar holes, they're old,
You
sometimes,
You go along that trail, up in Walden, and if you come in from East Hardwick and you go up through there, where it crosses the road several times, and you go up through and there's still old buildings where they would probably offload milk, or it's not even like a station. It's just like almost like somewhere out there. Okay, this is where we stop and pick up 30 cans of milk or what have you. That trail is such an integral part of the landscape. It's almost like it's always been there.
Cell coverage along the trail, lots of dead spots.
Not too bad. There are segments in the northeastern and then the northwestern parts of the trail. So we've done an analysis, a desktop analysis via GIS in terms of where there's dead zones and sort of like hot spots, and overlaid that with like how frequent are the trail crossings? Are there areas that first responders need to be concerned about in terms of like sort of that like perfect Bermuda Triangle effect of like no cell service? The road crossings are few and far between. It's more rural. So we are doing outreach with a few of the volunteer fire and rescue organizations in those areas to just have a conversation about what equipment do you have, what training do you have, do you need to partner with, say, like Smugs Rescue, which has more backcountry type of equipment in certain areas. So we are beginning those conversations
Do
now.
did we have some issues with the going over the trail for homeowners at one time to get over right of ways?
You're talking about agricultural crossings
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
private crossings.
Right.
We had a spot a lot, and we came up with a solution. The Farm Bureau didn't like it, and it's dead. But what it means is you have the ability to cross the trail if it's for agricultural purposes. And the railroad line is responsible for the maintenance and the liability for the crossing. But if it's a private crossing, so if you had a farm that's been broken up and is now housing, that becomes a private crossing, and you're supposed to be, and that was, remember the young couple that came in here?
We had some issues,
Yeah.
but that's all been resolved. Yeah.
Well, it's still probably out there, and I bet there are a lot of people that might be buying land on the other side of the railroad track between the Connecticut River and the railroad track, that it would be a private crossing, and so the railroad resist anything to expand that because of the liability and the potential for accidents.
Correct.
So yes, I spent a summer on that.
And we found out how powerful they are. I was in a meeting with Dan and, not long ago, and, but they don't like it. They don't like it. And, you know,
You mean the railroads?
yeah, the railroads, they're very, very powerful.
Well, there's not a railroad on that. I'm talking
Well-
about this trail.
It's the same,
Same.
it's essentially the same law because it's rail banked. Because this could potentially come back to be an active railroad at some point.
Oh.
So all the same federal laws.
And that's
apply.
why the Act 250 exemption ended up because rails, if they had to comply with the laws for every municipality they went through from the east to the west coast, it would be just impossible. So there's some federal preemption.
Didn't realize that. I thought they were out of it completely, but they're not out.
And wow.
There are others that are, like
If
if
it's
you
not,
didn't pay,
if it's not rail banked,
Yeah.
then it would not.
like that little spur we talked about, New York failed to like bank it, so it
Correct.
goes into New York, disappears, comes back.
On the
DNA
correct.
Yeah.
So New Hampshire did not rail bank their property. A lot of that has reverted back to original landowners.
But I try to, that's a question that comes up frequently, because folks really want access to the trails if they have property that is abutting it, and really trying to find that balance between supporting businesses and then preserving this rail-based corridor. So it's a large part of what our program does is communications and outreach around what does that even mean to be a rail-based
A
corridor?
tremendous number of crossings across that trail.
Yes, yes, and everybody should be in a crossing agreement.
Is there anything under the trail? There's no access under the trail.
There's a few cattle passes,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Bridges,
Cattle
and
passes.
overpass.
Okay.
historic stone arches in some areas, they're just
Wow.
gorgeous. So yeah, but I also try to explain to communities sort of like the concept of access management, right? If you have a ton of driveways back to back to back to back, it's not super safe for people pulling in and out. And anyway.
So who has the right of way? The trail user or the person whose driveway?
It's supposed to be the trail user,
I assume that.
but it doesn't always happen like that.
Even with the stop signs though, because you have the stop signs at the driveways, it's thinking of having a Danville along Joe's Pond, right where the new house is. And there's stop signs all through there, but
And more research is showing, this is newer information that's coming up. I mean, obviously for larger state crossings, we put stop signs up because we want pedestrians and cyclists to yield, because you just don't always know if the car is going to stop. But more research is coming out that these, we call them the low volume crossings. So in more rural areas, it actually is more dangerous because people are just not, cars and cyclists or pedestrians aren't expecting either of the other users. So again, we're looking at, do we need to treat these crossings separately, have more warning signs, because it's more likely folks to have an accident? It's a little counterintuitive. You think like West Danville crossing Route 2, be hyper aware, but it is like more and more data is showing more rural areas with these driveway crossings are actually less safe.
Summertime, are ATVs allowed in there?
They are not.
No, not motorized.
Okay, so they're, snowmobiles are, ATVs are.
Correct.
Electric bikes at a certain class.
All three classes, yeah,
Electric
Oh, all
bikes,
three classes.
And
are
horses.
currently allowed.
horses are allowed,
Mhm.
Yes.
and the, so electric bikes are allowed.
But it's not paved, right? This is all crushed up.
Correct.
Same as.
Interesting.
So we've talked a little bit about this, but in terms of trail maintenance, again, we think of all of these trails as a linear corridor. And this like image of our sort of box of like, we're not just thinking of mowing the vegetation on the ground, but we're also thinking about what is coming in from the trees. So that's something that we look at. And here's an example of some of our mowers out on the trail. And really, program trail maintenance, big picture, it's similar to what you would think of with any of our assets. So there's the need for asset management and inspection, so annual inspections, or routine inspections of culvert and bridges, really trying to move to a system preservation mindset as opposed to a Band-Aid or a reactionary fix. Looking at, establishing best management practices for seasonal maintenance and what that means. We discussed this somewhat with some of the questions about crossing agreements and who has the right to do what, but that all, falls under the umbrella of trail operations. And so a well-managed trail system really needs clear policies and procedures for what can be done where and how and when. So our trail operations is focusing on establishing clear policies and procedures for allowable uses, what permits are needed for different types of uses, how do we resolve user conflicts in a fair and equitable way, how do we mitigate encroachment and encampment issues, what agreements are needed to support trail connections and other type of amenities, trail access issues, crossings, right-of-way, trail etiquette. And also under this umbrella is the development of a trail count and survey program, which we're piloting on the LVRT, but we'll deploy statewide to have a better understanding of how many people are where, what time of year is it the busiest, and to supplement that data with some deeper dives in terms of origin and destination studies, trying to better understand the spending profiles of folks. And that leads into this sort of next bucket of a focus area for the program, and that's, how does VTrans support economic development and different towns along the trail.
Which section would you say is used the most? Is there certain sections that are used the most?
Well, right now, just because certain segments haven't been open, the highest volume is really in the Danville, West Danville up to St. Johnsbury in terms of like sheer volume of people. And the peak time is July through early October in terms of volume of folks.
I should know this. I should know this. Is that going right to the notch?
It does not go through.
No, they avoid, that's why it's so damn curvy, is to minimize the climb.
Yeah.
So,
It even makes you wonder what, way back when they put the rail line in, did they purposely want to go up into
Standard?
Standard, or because it was probably an easier way to get through there? So if somebody had
they
some
minimize the
power.
grade,
Yeah.
for that reason.
And the reason why they had to do that is because if you look at those 2 points, if you look at the elevation of the track, what used to be the track, and if you actually just looked at it on a flat plane, it's like this. So they had to go all the way up into Greensboro Bend and come back around just to get that differential in elevation.
Right, yeah.
Because it's just too steep, and it looks like they're right next to each other, but they actually had to go out and back just so that they could make the climb.
Amazing how they put that rail line in years ago, what they went through.
When they had to put them in, what was the maximum grade they could handle?
I don't know what it was then, it's about 3% now.
I didn't, now?
Senator Standard or something that got it to jaunt up that.
Why do I have to wait 5 minutes? Okay.
Yeah, but that's there because of the grade.
And actually, between St. John's and Danville's like 1,500 feet higher than St. J. So,
Yeah, that must be really,
so that's why there's that big curve through Pumpkin Hill and,
yeah.
to make the
Sorry.
grade.
So how many, from Danville or St. Johnsbury all the way to Swan, how many places can you get to park your car and get on the trail? Like half a dozen or
So
dozen?
for just the LVRT alone, there are 26 trailheads, but some are informal and not marked and really sort of dirt bluffs along the side of the road. There's about half of that are established trailheads that are signed or will be signed that have amenities at them.
Okay.
So-
No rest area though.
No official rest area, and that's a really good question. So I'll jump into, one of the low-hanging fruits we see for a huge focus for the agency to partner with towns over the next 3 to 5 years is the development of trailheads and what amenities are at trailheads.
And
And
it's also the cost, because this came up in West Danville and the number of porta potties. And historically, this little West Danville Community Club had taken care of the beach.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you have this explosion of users.
That's what I'm saying. How do you keep up with it? Wow.
Well, and so actually, there's some shared responsibility to provide those facilities, because if you don't, you can imagine what your trail's gonna look like. People are gonna have to go off into the
Right,
woods.
right.
And so, but to expect a little town community club to fund that, double, triple, and people were complaining about the overuse and the condition of the, facilities. It was really a mess. And
Well,
I
even the
think
grocery store, how does he keep up with that? He has to have a pump house and everything else.
Marty,
Yeah, I mean, if they're gonna let, that's enough.
he has outdoor porta potties, and he also has in-store
Well, that's
bathrooms.
it, that's quite an expense, unless he's doing a lot of business from there, otherwise it's quite an expense to,
Well, the snowmobiler stuff there.
I mean, there's gotta be a return for him, because boy, to pump those porta potties every couple days or whatever it is, I don't know.
It's expensive.
In West Danville, where Senator Kitchell was talking about, is probably, that is quite an area right there. I mean, they have
Between the,
summertime, they have the lunch wagons that come in there, they have the ability to go swimming right there. Some parking, I can almost envision,
and some
enough
days
of
that, with the people using the beach on these hot summer days,
Yeah.
they're parking along Route 15 and stuff, so it's a,
This is all the stuff we're trying to work out, like that Jackie's talking about. I mean, the ones in Danville right now, we're paying for those.
Yeah, and
V-Trans puts them there.
and for
But
that reason,
we gotta
because,
figure out long term, like what each community wants and who's paying for it and that whole thing. And that's the part that Jackie's working on right now. She's gonna talk about that.
Yeah, so the LVRT was really, because of the management plan, was really our model, and this is an image of proposed and or existing trailheads, and we've developed different trailhead types based on land available, the needs that the communities express. So we have categorized them level 1 through 3. Level 3 is, you'll see an image right here, an example of that is sort of like the Cadillac of the trailhead. So, it's an example of, you have parking with it is spaces enough to have a truck and a trailer for equestrians or snow machines. It might be co-located with an existing town facility, as well as all the things you might think of, like a restroom, picnic table, pavilion, things like that. So just, having towns really wrap their brain around, like, what are our options? What do we want? And I think, we can't overstate, the importance of trailheads, as they really serve as a gateway to the trail and a gateway to these towns. So it's trying to think about the traffic going both ways, right? We want people to access our trails. We also want them to get in towns to spend money. So the LVRT management plan did develop recommendations for how far apart these could be spaced, what sort of amenities could be at each of these types of trailheads. We are working with towns across the state to help connect them with resources to build these trailheads out. We've developed trailhead standards, which are inclusive of best practices for design, performance, specifications of trailside facilities, everything from a kiosk to a bench. Because again, we don't want towns to have to spend their money developing this from scratch every time, when we really want something that's uniform. So whether you get on Swanton or St. Johnsbury, I'm on the LVRT. So that'll be a guide we can hand to towns. Additionally, I think it's important, come back to this, to mention the community assistance we are providing for towns in order to be able to develop trailheads if they choose to do so. So there was the $2 million grant program that was launched in 2022, thanks to an earmark from Senator Sanders' office, and that went directly to LVRT communities to build out trailheads, or if they weren't ready to build out trailheads, to pursue a scoping and feasibility study for where could a trailhead be, what sort of issues there might be with that. We allocated about half of the $2 million in that first round, and we anticipate a second round because we had 10 communities apply and were awarded funds, and a little over half of those were for scoping and feasibility. So we know they're going to need to come back for design and construction. Additionally, right now there is $3 million in the governor's recommended budget, again for continued development, LVRT, trailheads, amenities, things like that for our LVRT towns. So again, in addition to the technical assistance we're providing to towns as they have these projects, in order to walk them through the permitting process, trying to make that as streamlined as possible and connecting them to what grant program might be a good fit for them, as well as developing these design details and standards for them so they don't have to pay for that, it's already there, right? I think just a quick touch point, because we often get asked in terms of, hey, I'm coming from Arizona, I want to ride my bike from Swan to St. Johnsbury. How do I do that? Where are the bathrooms? So for all 4 of our trails, we are updating our website to have better information on trip planning, where these resources are, where you can park, all the things you think you would need to ask. Additionally, we are in the process right now of undertaking the LVRT marketing plan, which will launch ahead of the grand opening. And we'll go, throughout the year in order to promote the LVRT both in the Northeast region and nationwide and in Canada markets. And then lastly, just as you all were mentioning, having a conversation about what do folks like Marty's do? Like, do they want these cars to park? Do they like the extra business? Do they not like this extra business? So there's some on the ground projects that are happening due to the rail trail councils really championing them. And one of those is a trail friendly business program where these groups are doing outreach to these businesses that are impacted and having a conversation. Is this working for you?
Good.
What's working and what's not?
Good about, because you gotta be up to their partner.
Exactly.
You can't put all the burden on them, because let me tell you, restrooms are tough to keep clean.
It's,
You gotta have inside your building.
and that's something that the Northwest RPC did already for the Missisquoi Valley Rail Trail. So again, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just taking that to the LVRT, this concept of a trail-friendly business program. And that's something that, again, this partnership with the RPCs and these trail councils is huge for us, because this is something that we wouldn't necessarily be able to undertake on our own. So
Yes, go ahead.
On your slide where you have the parking lot, whenever I see a parking lot, especially new parking lots, I always like to say 2 things. 1, I really hope we're thinking about where charging stations could go so that they're essentially located. And 2, parking lots are ugly and they create a lot of stormwater issues. I think they're less ugly when we cover them with solar panels, like Echo does. So I don't know how that can be. I know in Vermont you have to think about snow plowing, but as you start to pitch these designs, I just hope that's top of mind to think about how to possibly have these cantilever structures so that it can reach over the parking lot, collecting the solar rays and maybe charging our cars.
that's definitely a question that few of the towns have asked. And at this point, because it really is up to the town in terms of what they would like to do, that's certainly an opportunity. If they're willing to maintain that long term, then that would be fine. Any other thoughts or questions about?
Yes,
So the grant funds for the towns is the governor put in for general fund. But your position, I assume, is paid from the rail budget.
Yes.
Yes. And it's only you, or there's an Army
Army
1.5.
9.5,
Right.
correct. But our hope is that this summer to be able to open that up for some limited service positions for 2 full-time field technicians. For all the things like culvert inventories, being able to have eyes on the trail, dealing with encroachment issues. Like it's very helpful to have a presence on the trail every week, whether it's in Rupert or St. Johnsbury.
do we have any idea roughly how many people use the trail in the course of the summer, or of course of the year? I don't know.
It's a couple of thousand, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I will say I'm happy to provide this report to your staff that through NVDA, they just recently completed for the Caledonia County towns an economic impact assessment and trail user projections for the LVRT just for those 5 towns, because that's a segment of trail that's been open for a while. So we actually had data in terms of count data for that. And it was pretty eye-opening and just astronomical. Again, the volume of people, St. Johnsbury to Danville in those summer months, really July 4th to end of September, that being peak in terms of volume. And then I think, again, eye-opening from that report in terms of, the impact for the local economies. Again, I'll just hit the highlights of if we do nothing else other than build and maintain the trail, people are coming. If we are a little bit more thoughtful about really, building out hospitality in terms of trailside amenities, lodging establishments, the amount of money being spent in the locals.
St. John Reed Danville,
communities is
what's
huge.
the length there, and how many miles?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Ballpark, 5 miles, 10 miles?
No, more than that, I'd say about 20.
10 to 15.
I was gonna say 15.
Okay, so that's the heavily used area.
Yeah,
And how many do you think go there in the summertime, but their count roughly, how many people use it?
I don't know. Vast had some trail counters out there,
No, just curious.
but I don't know.
Okay.
That was the first part that was open.
Yes, yeah, that's.
We can certainly get you
No,
that
just I'm
number.
curious, you
We're
know.
gonna do trail counters, we're gonna actually. put
Oh,
some
okay,
out and
okay,
figure that out, but,
I'm sure.
we're not there yet, but we will do that.
Sure, it's growing. Yes, go ahead.
And so do you get appeals from other trails saying, hey, you've done such a great job on these rail trails, can you work with us or help the Cross Vermont Trail or all the other trails that are out there that aren't banked trail, they're just like there's a lot of parts of the
We're gonna,
Cross Vermont Trail.
we're gonna focus on the properties that we own.
Right.
Thorson Parks has a connection to a lot of the other trails, so there's other state agencies doing other things outside. We're really just focusing on the rail trails because that's what we own.
Right, no, I understand that, but I just can imagine people wanting you to help do more. Because it's like, hey, look at all these resources and help for the rail, why limit it to the property that you own?
We'll see where it goes.
Is there somebody in Forest Parks that basically is your job? Do you know?
No.
You're the only person that's take up.
In terms
Ooh,
of
look at that.
rail trails, correct. Yeah, I mean, there
We're not
are,
rail
there are,
trails,
there are
just
certainly staff, in terms of like the parks, that I will interface with, just depending on what the project
They
is.
work on state park trails, not like on the private
Correct,
trails.
correct.
Where's that bridge that's, on the screen?
This bridge, I believe, is in Morristown.
Wow, that's a nice one.
Yeah.
Well done. All wood,
Yes,
I mean, wood.
or it might actually
Yeah,
be,
I'm not sure which one
Sheldon.
that is.
Oh, okay.
I think it's in Sheldon though, actually.
Looks like a
Oh,
long
what
one.
is Sheldon? That's on the Missisquoi, right? The one, are you talking about the one that's, the road problem? Yeah,
Mhm. Almost think
that
that's
could
what
be,
it
that's on the
is,
Missisquoi
just
Valley.
because of the background there.
Could be that.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Anything else? Great job.
Exciting stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, great job. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's always good to hear the overview of that. Okay, committee, we got about 10 minutes and we'll get back on at about 11:25. We'll finish up with the drawbridge.
The famous